Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Whether it's Doge not knowing who they're firing, everything Trump has done so far has been sloppy. Whether it's Doge not knowing who they're firing, ICE not knowing who they're deporting, turns out they can't even do a classic DEI purge right.
Tonight, the Pentagon sparking outrage after removing from its website a story celebrating the Army record of American icon Jackie Robinson.
A senior military official tells us tonight that the Pentagon relies on computer software to scrub DEI content from its websites, and that ultimately those stories about Jackie Robinson were removed by mistake.
Yeah. Oh, don't blame us. Blame our racist software. We should have never used Chat KKK. Classic mistake.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the mixtape to our midweek EP. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex, the wax cylinder of the company. Or at least that's how I feel.
Oh, darling, I know you're hardly sleeping at the moment because you're working so hard on both Quiet Riot and Podyssey. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine because I love it, you know? It honestly feels like all my scattiness for the last 40 years or whatever that seemed to only make me a decent player for a pub quiz is kind of coming together on this. You know, I have so much useless information in my head that is proving very useful. Anyway, how are you, my love?
Yeah, good. A little bit of hay fever, but I'm not complaining because the weather has finally got warmer. And as long-time listeners will know, I am no fan of the winter months. So I'm delighted that the spring has sprung and the weather is warmer and the sunshine is more frequent.
Yeah, the cats have been out for the first time this year. So they're loving
George
life.
Meowcle and Freddie Mercury, for those who aren't familiar.
Correct. I love the first time I open the door for them. Because, just to explain, they go out through the roof garden, basically, and use the rest of the neighborhood roofs. So they have access to loads of surface area, but it's all at the roof level, if that makes sense.
They live in the canopy.
Yeah. And
it's amazing. Canopy cats.
And because there's no cat flap, it's either open door policy or not. So they don't go out basically between roughly, I would say, November and March. And the first time I open the door for them every March is such a magical moment.
Aww.
They run upstairs and they cannot believe it.
We're going to have to crowdfund for a GoPro to go on them so we can track their maneuvers on their
I don't think my partner could cope with that. They'd be on it the whole time and kind of, worrying. We've got a little camera up there on the bird feeder.
Oh, cute.
That identifies everything wrongly. It's like, it's a crow and a squirrel. That's all we get. So stop giving us exotic birds.
Right. Well, as ever, Alex, there's almost too much to talk about. So what's tickling your fancy today? For a change, I'm going to help us focus on some very uplifting good news from government. And that's Ed Miliband's GB energy policy on solar.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd love to talk about that, especially after Badenoch's missives on net zero, which I thought were very, very tinny-head. Also, let's delve into the coalition of the willing a little bit and see whether the pieces are moving around the chessboard at an EU level as well. There's loads for us to chew on, I think, there.
if we get time, let's do a mini section on the Liberal Democrat conference that is happening this weekend in Harrogate. They have a spring and an autumn conference, and they're there at the moment, because I think it's been quite a good while since we chatted about their priorities.
Well, let's crack on.
Quiet riot.
In a move sure to upset opposition leader Kemi Badenoch, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband has unveiled plans for GB Energy to install solar panels on government buildings, including hospitals and schools, to free up funds for frontline services. So far, so uncontroversial, I would think.
Great British Energy is your publicly owned energy company, and here's its first project, putting solar panels on the roofs of schools and hospitals in your community.
This year alone, we have saved over £500,000 worth of energy costs through solar generation.
That's all been able to be reinvested into our students' education, into additional resources.
Into the building, into trips, into lots of opportunities for students.
Patient care, being able to employ more staff, which allows the hospital trust to treat more people.
It's really good that we can do all we can for the environment, to protect the environment for future generations.
I feel really proud that I'm part of a school that uses solar panels because it's helping, so it makes me feel like I'm helping.
That's what a publicly owned energy company can do for our country.
He told the BBC that he's very confident the government will create hundreds of thousands of jobs with its green plans, but did not put a figure on how close it is to Labour's manifesto target of 650,000 jobs. The Energy Secretary said net zero represents the growth opportunity of the 21st century, and that the sector grew at a faster rate than the economy as a whole last year. And I remember a good news item you did about a month ago. It grew at a significantly faster rate than the economy as a whole, almost double. A $200 million investment from the clean energy company's government-funded budget will provide solar panels for the roofs of hundreds of schools and hospitals. The investment also includes funding for councils and community groups to build local clean power projects, such as community-owned onshore wind, rooftop solar and hydropower in rivers. Miliband told ITV there are many schools and hospitals facing sky-high energy bills as a result of our dependence on fossil fuels. This will cut bills for 200 schools, 200 hospitals, a 300% increase in the coverage of solar panels in terms of the NHS in hospitals. I mean, this is bloody good news, right? There's no downside.
It is bloody good news. And not only does it reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, of course, what he really means is this also reduces our dependence on Russia and other fossil fuel producing nations with whom we may not always have the most cordial of relations. And frankly, I can't believe it hasn't happened sooner. You know, I've lived in many an ex-local authority building and have always been amazed that with their, 1960s flat roofs, they've not already been plastered in solar panels. So I'm really excited about it. I'm very, very pleased it's happening. And I sort of can't understand, as I say, why previous governments haven't done it sooner. So I think all in all, very, very good news, which government needs at the moment.
Okay, so we think it's a good idea. So let me ask you this. How do you think it will be spun as a bad idea by the Telegraph, the Mail, etc.?
Oh, they'll find a way.
Yeah, what do you think that way will be?
Woke roofs. Oh, we don't get any sun. This is an enormous investment in a bad weather country. It'll be ridiculous. No, don't, all that kind of nonsense. And probably they'll find a cost angle to it as well. So as much as government are doing a very good job at spinning this as reducing energy bills, I think what certainly Reform UK know, because this is almost all they talk about at the moment, is that us having significantly higher energy bills than many comparator economies of our size is something that really cuts through with the public. People are still feeling the pinch hugely from the major price rises in energy over the last few years, and certainly since Russia invaded Ukraine, that they will try and go at this as some kind of, solar is so much more expensive. But in my lifetime, the cost of solar energy has come down exponentially. I mean, I remember doing environmental projects as a teenager at school and trying to whip up all of my class to get behind climate change action. And, we need to be doing far more on renewable energies. And I used to make little models of wind farms and bring them into school to demonstrate to people. Ironically, I would use a plastic straw to do it that was a bendy straw. And I'd bend the top over and then split it into 3 to look like the blades of a fan.
I can see little Naomi doing
You can,
that.
can't you?
I bet you were a bloody goody two-shoes, weren't you?
I can assure you my school reports say things like face of an angel, mind of a devil. So no, I was not goody two-shoes.
Oh my God, that was literally my principal's line about me.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, well, look, we found each other.
So
birds of a feather. I'm sure that they'll try desperately to attack it on several fronts, but cost to the consumer will probably be one of them. Why is it the public sector that's benefiting from all of this when it should be the ordinary consumer? Blah 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 blah.
I mean, it's schools and hospitals.
It's pretty
loads
average
of people
person
use
there.
them.
Indeed.
I mean, solar panels. The technology is so reliable and so cheap right now that the argument about how many days of sunshine or whatever is complete nonsense, because the technology is so cheap right now.
Yeah.
If you got 10 days of energy from them, it would be, they'd pay off within their first year. So,
right.
And energy is so expensive, of course.
Yeah.
So,
and as I said, they do need some good news stories. And Ed Miliband really does feel like he's the party's golden boy at the moment. Labour List have done a poll with Survation of Labour members, ranking all of the cabinet members and asking members to vote for who they think is the most favourable in their eyes. And right at the top with a stonking 69% net favourability is Ed Miliband. Languishing with a negative 11% is Rachel Reeves, closely followed by Liz Kendall. Ed Miliband, Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy and Hilary Benn right at the top. So
nice.
It's clear that, him being able to offer these good news stories is really helping him.
Yeah. And I mean, they hated him when he was actual leader.
Indeed.
But he's one of those people who seems to have quite effectively rehabilitated himself to the base of the party, which is
and
to
I
the
wonder
country
if
at
part
large.
of that is not giving up. So many leaders leave in disgrace or because they've failed to have electoral success at the ballot box, and then they stomp off and go and do their thing in the private sector and make lots of money and set up their foundation or whatever. But Ed has really clung on, and I wonder if they're rewarding that loyalty to the cause, to the party, to the mission, to the country by saying, well, look, he probably could have gone off and made more money elsewhere or got a job at the UN or, in America like his brother. And he hasn't. He's hung around, dug in, done the hard work and been bloody consistent on the environment.
Yeah, I feel there's a balance to be struck there. You don't want to end up like Ian Duncan Smith, who is the sort of Benjamin Button of political careers. He sort of went from leader to frontbencher to minor minister to backbencher to, I'm sure, crazy person with a sandwich board outside soon. Talking of rehabilitation, Theresa May also has laid into Kemi Badenoch, basically quote tweeted Kemi Badenoch's speech about net zero, saying it's challenging, but it's achievable. And what's more, we have to try. Delaying action will harm the generation that you say you want to protect. So, and will increase migration, which you say you're really bothered about. And,
Well, Theresa May was pretty bothered about it too.
Well, yeah, sure. And that might be one of the reasons that is driving Theresa May's fervor as an environmentalist. I don't mind.
No, neither.
It's a real thing.
I was on Politics Live earlier this week, and there was a really big ding-dong, and largely led by Camilla Tominey of GB News and The Telegraph.
God, why is she still a thing?
Well, you'll have to ask the BBC why they invite her on. But she was, going on and on and on about putting a cap on illegal migrants if they come through safe and legal routes, which of course is, in itself, just doesn't make any sense. It makes my brain ache with the stupidity.
So basically, what Ukrainians using the scheme and Hong Kongers
exactly,
using the
exactly.
scheme.
You should have caps. We should be prepared to have a cap. And I did say, look, why is it always the very same people who are allergic to those seeking asylum and refuge that are also those that are anti any action on climate change, any meaningful action on climate change, which will have the most enormous impact on the mass displacement of people globally, and therefore drive up the numbers trying to escape famine, poverty, flood, etc. So, they're just mad. Getting back to the policy on the solar panels, what I really liked about it was, A, how much saving a school or a hospital could get annually, and that can be anything between kind of 25,000 and 45,000 a year, according to the Department for Net Zero figures. But also that any surplus energy gets sold back into the grid, and the schools and hospitals get to keep the cash difference. Alex, surely this could happen in, communities around the country. If you've got a community land trust, if you've got a community trust owning some affordable housing in an area, all of that could become quite much more of a circular economy, couldn't it?
Yes, and I think part of the good core of this scheme is that people will be able to see it happening. They will be able to see that the installation is very simple, that it doesn't take a very long time. When your entire community is basically full of people installing these things, it normalizes it. It makes it a much less scary prospect to pick up the phone and say, maybe I could put some on my roof,
These are high-paid, skilled, good jobs. And one thing that I think we do have to note is that we need a bit more joined up thinking across government on getting FE colleges to put on the right courses around green manufacturing and green installation. There are a lot of FE colleges still doing very traditional plumbing and carpentry and plastering courses and things like that. Of course, we will continue to need those kinds of skills, but they are going to need the incentive to put on the courses for particularly young people that will then match to the kinds of big infrastructure spend projects that Lib is setting out.
No college should be churning out steady numbers of gas boiler engineers right now.
Exactly.
They should be on a dual track where they're learning how to install heat pumps and fix those, etc., etc. But I will be really interested to see the reaction of things like academies. Will they go for this? Presumably, the sort of the umbrella funding that's available to do this will be available to schools that operate under an academy trust or whatever. So I will be very, very interested to see what places like Michaela's school do. And,
Berbel's things,
and Paul Marshall's old lot.
And Toby Young.
So,
but it's so popular. So, friend of the show, Luke Trill, obviously runs More in Common. They did a poll this week commissioned by the World Wildlife Fund that found that the majority of people in the UK say the government hasn't been doing enough to protect the environment and nature. We've known this for a long time, right? And you talked about it on the show with David Gork. You said to him, this breakdown in a consensus that we had for over 2 decades in this country, right and left agreed, we do have to tackle climate change. We know it's popular, which again brings into question Badenoch's U-turn on it all. And David Gork, of course, was saying to us that he's trying to predict where trends are moving amongst the electorate, that they are moving away from being pro all of this to anti because of the rise in energy bills and feeling it in their own back pocket. But I think that fails to consider how many younger people are entering the electorate over the next 4 years in the run-up to the next election.
And also it fails to consider the effect of strong leadership from a united group of parties saying this is the right thing. It makes no sense to begin to fracture it, start arguing the opposite, and then point to the polls that are saying some people are buying your position, which is completely fallacious. To say, well, we're just following the polling.
Yeah.
You're a leader. You're meant to lead the polling, not follow it. So, look, it's always been murky. I mean, I was writing about this genuinely almost 15 years ago in the sort of 2012 floods. There is something uncomfortable about classical neoliberalism and climate change action. Climate change action requires internationalism. It requires the signing away of certain bits of sovereignty, of agreeing you're going to do things as a country without being made to. And also it requires a muscular and interventionist state. And none of those things sit comfortably with conservatives. So they were basically on board for the period where they looked batty by not being on board. But as soon as they sniffed the possibility that they can get off this train and not look completely crazy, they took it. Yeah. I think that's the bottom line.
Very much. And bottom line is a good word because it is so often associated with big corporates and P&L accounts and this tension between capitalism and climate action. And I'm sure if we had some of the more radical members of the Green Party on the show, they would argue that the two can't coexist, that until we sort of surrender ideas about economic growth, we can't ever hope to truly tackle climate change. And there is tension, without question there is, but we are where we are in terms of the system that we operate in at the moment. And there's a huge amount that we could be doing much more when it comes to carbon taxes and emissions trading, setting regulatory standards, decoupling growth from resource consumption, and consumer-led change. I mean, consumers are demanding more of this. I'm seeing far more of my friends that aren't particularly political, don't tend to care much about these kinds of issues, making choices even with their takeaway. They'll go, oh, no, we shouldn't order from them because they bring everything in plastic cartons. No, let's order from these guys because it all comes in cardboard, recyclable boxes. That they weren't saying that kind of thing a couple of years ago. So consumer demand will have a profound impact on how capitalist organizations, profit-making organizations pivot what they're doing. You talked about it, I think, in a good news story a couple of weeks ago on the main show, that we might be reassessing GDP and how it is measured to include things like the asset value of your tidal power and your wind speeds, etc., to try and get a more holistic view of what we're measuring and why it is both an opportunity and an asset and not just a risk to us in terms of environmental degradation.
Can I be annoyed for about a minute as we're talking about this? So why the fuck is the BBC running stories like extreme day trips, I go abroad then fly home in time for bed? Can you explain this to me? This is literally a nothing story. It's fluff, it's color. Yeah. So they don't have to run it in any way. They've just found two people who do this thing. Monica Stott, 37, has been to Milan, Bergamo, Lisbon, Amsterdam, and even Reykjavik for a single day. You have to scroll down 22 paragraphs to get to a one sentence that says, despite Monica and Luca's enthusiasm, extreme day trips have drawn criticism over their environmental impact. No shit.
Oh my God, it's number 3 on the most read at the moment.
I know. Why on earth are the BBC running stories like this? Who is managing your website news output? Stop it.
Do you think they're just trying to cash in on the algorithm because so many people were Googling issues about the Heathrow fire?
I really could not give a fuck. You know, the whole reason we pay a license fee is so that the BBC are not trying to cash in on the algorithm. You know, they have an agenda that is above this, let's get clicks.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, my minute is up.
Quiet Riot. Today's episode is sponsored by the wonderful people at Shopify. Alex, do you recognise that sound?
I can't say that I do.
Well, it is the sound of a sale on Shopify. I've been using Shopify for years to power the Best for Britain shop, and it's got me thinking that we definitely need to use Shopify for selling Quiet Riot merch.
Oh, and we're getting there, aren't we? We're very close to getting our first Quiet Riot merchandise up and running. I've seen some early designs. It feels like everyone but me has a side hustle nowadays. I don't even have a Substack.
Exactly. And Shopify, it just sort of like takes all of the hassle out of selling things. I don't know what we'd do without it at Best for Britain, because it's an all-in-one commerce platform. You don't need to learn any tricky coding or faff around with the back end of your website. It's very much plug and play, and it just works. And it means that you can just get on with selling things quickly, easily, and cost effectively.
I mean, for a small company like us, there's only the three of us. That's me sold, because the last thing I want to be doing is trying to manage yet another process. And I like the idea that Shopify can help you get selling across other marketplaces like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, not just your own site. Because I think that actually there is the potential for our merchandise to go viral. You know, I really feel it in my bones, especially our range of Christmas jumpers. I think they will do very, very well. Plus, I hear that, unlike us, Shopify have won awards. And with an extensive business course library, they're just there ready to support a business in every way they need.
Quiet Riot listeners, Shopify want to help you to get selling as well. So they've got an incredible deal. You can sign up for a £1 only trial month at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot. That's all lowercase.
So go to shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot to take your business to the next level today. Huge thanks to today's sponsor, Shopify, and remember to sign up for a £1 trial period at shopify.co.uk/Quiet Riot, all lowercase.
Quiet Riot. Let's move on and talk about Coalition of the Willing. Europe, including the UK, it feels struggling to reach a consensus on helping Ukraine with military support. And I think that means it's testing just how willing that so-called coalition is. Why? Well, this week, Europe's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, hoped to mobilise 40 billion of military aid to strengthen Ukraine's position ahead of upcoming talks with Russia. But EU leaders have dramatically watered down those plans. Originally, so going back quite a few weeks now, her plan had been to ship Ukraine at least 1.5 million rounds of artillery ammunition this year. Hungary vetoed it. Of course, it was bloody Hungary. So then she tried again, and hoping that the coalition of willing states would deliver 40 billion in military aid to Ukraine this year. But that plan, again, didn't survive impact, with the vetoes of those member states far less willing to dig deep into their own coffers to make sacrifices for Ukraine. So she tried again, writing to foreign and defence ministers, proposing a far more modest plan to provide 5 billion for 2 million rounds of ammunition. And even that was rebuffed, and they kind of landed on a voluntary support only kind of wording. 26 member states, again, of course, minus Hungary, approved a joint statement reaffirming continued and unwavering support for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, blah, 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 and continuing to provide Ukraine with regular, predictable financial support. Now, this is against the backdrop of the next stage of Russian-US ceasefire negotiations. I think that begins again on Monday in Saudi Arabia. And then there's the next higher level coalition of the willing meeting in France on Thursday, and that's led by Macron with, we're told, some involvement from the UK. And then another story that popped up this week was about UK firms being frozen out from accessing a slice of the EU's 150 billion euro war fund procurement plans. However, it has been confirmed that if a UK firm already has a presence within the single market, of course it can access that war chest. And for the rest, if you're a US company involved in defence and you're not yet there in terms of having some kind of footprint within the EU, it's all going to be contingent on that UK-EU reset and whether they can finally agree the fabled Defence and Security Pact. Alex, what's your view on where the coalition of the willing is at the moment? And I think importantly, who you think is really leading it? Starmer was kind of first out of the traps and brought them all over to London, but Macron's really been gaining ground since then. Do you sense there's a rivalry between the two of them as to who is really heading up the coalition of the willing?
No, I don't actually. I think they have been working very well together from the start of this. I think there is sufficient space for them to be able to project themselves as the leader of this project to their domestic voter market without really upsetting each other or the rest of the partners at the European level. So if you want to look at who's initiated meetings, where they've taken place, etc., then I would say the UK is slightly ahead.
Yeah.
But I have never, ever sensed that from Starmer, which is, I think, one of the attractive parts of his personality as a...
I do get a bit of it from Macron, I won't lie.
Oh, from Macron,
and obviously he's in such a more politically vulnerable situation.
But you need two cocks to have a cockfight, And I think it seems to me that Starmer just isn't that kind of alpha guy. As I said, I think it's a very positive quality in a leader because he doesn't need his ego constantly massaged. I don't sense a rivalry. I think they've been working very, very effectively together. I think the problem is elsewhere.
Well, let's talk about elsewhere. Hungary costs the EU a lot of money and it's a massive thorn in the side, and Orban being a complete you-know-what about support for Ukraine against Putin. At what point do you think the EU might just completely be pushed to the point of no return with Orban? Do you think they need to consider booting Hungary out?
Okay, so they can't. There's no mechanism for it. It would need a treaty change, and that would be a massive can of worms for every EU country. The last thing they want to do right now, because a lot of them have referendum provisions when it comes to treaty changes. And the last thing they will want to do right now is, have national referenda. There are mechanisms in Article 7 for suspending certain rights, but that has to be basically fairly wielded because it is subject to ECJ challenge. So basically they can't do the country equivalent of constructive dismissal, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? They can't bully Hungary and make its life so miserable that it has to quit at some point because it will just challenge that at the European court level. They are the guy who leaves the sort of corroded, dangerously prodding shell of a bicycle in the common hallway.
Or fills up your wheelie bin with their rubbish.
It really is so difficult. I think that parallel is quite an apt one because they're there and you have to share a space with them. So you have to kind of make nice. There is a new party in Hungary called TISA. It's EPP affiliated. So that's the basically ballpark of center-right parties, moderate CDU type
Yep.
things. And this new party, TISA, which has been in existence for just under a year, since last May, is now above Fidesz, the Orbán's party.
Great.
In the national polls, and has been for the whole of 2025. So it's it's only a sort of two-point lead, but it's a stable 2-point lead, if that makes sense. So maybe we won't have to deal with Orbán for very much longer.
Well, Alex, let's talk about a few other EU countries. Is it fair to suggest that EU countries to the south, so much further from Russia, feel less inclined to make difficult domestic decisions around financial and military sacrifices than Northern European ones? And, given your heritage, like, for instance, how is Greece feeling about all of this?
I mean, look, I think you have to have distance both in latitude and in longitude to be in that position, right?
Yep.
So Greece is, I think, the second highest defense spend in Europe, behind only Poland. And that is because it is
Turkey.
On the frontier of, well, it's not just Turkey, it's on the frontier also of the Red Sea, shipping channels, and, on the other side, sort of the boats coming across from Libya, etc. So it is buffeted by various non-friendlies in its neighborhood. So it's always been very defense-oriented. It's always had a shed load of American bases on its soil. Because of where it is placed geopolitically, they're extremely important for both America and Greece because they are the perfect advanced position, basically, for anything going on in the Middle East or North Africa. There is a strange paradox there, right? So in the same boat are countries like Finland and the Baltic states. They are also on that frontier with Russia and also have to be very active and are taking action to boost their defense spending, etc. But they are very hesitant to commit troops and, let's say, aircraft, for instance, to the coalition of the willing, because precisely they are on the frontier. So they cannot weaken their own border defenses because they are genuinely worried about what might happen if they move a significant amount of forces from guarding their country into the Ukraine. And so I guess what that means is that it falls to that second layer of countries, strangely, that are both big spenders and defense-minded, but they're not actually on the front line in terms of their own borders. So I think I would expect to see active participation by countries like the Netherlands, which is a very NATO Atlanticist country, Germany, places like that.
Yep. Denmark has, of course, been doing a huge amount.
Yes, Austria, Denmark, countries like that, I would expect will have to step up because, as I said, it's not massively reasonable to say to Finland or Estonia, move loads of your troops into Ukraine. And then what happens if some Russians, because we know how they work with sort of unofficial militia, guerrilla warfare that just come into the country and cause trouble and destabilize basically the democratic government. That's what they've done in every single case where they've then gone on to mount a full-on assault. So yeah, it's a tough one, but I think it will fall to that second tier of countries. Turkey is a very good example, and I think will be an exceptionally useful partner because it has just signed basically a complete cessation of violence with the separatist Kurdish
That's right, yes.
forces.
Yeah.
And so it genuinely has now a large amount of military hardware and personnel that was committed to a particular thing that no longer requires that level of
sustained investment.
Sustained investment. So they might be able to do something. But look, flip side, and I keep saying this to people going, oh, why doesn't Starmer just tell Trump to fuck off? And I keep saying wars and alliances require you to get to bed with some uncomfortable people. And Erdogan at the moment is doing some nasty shit in Turkey. Like, it looks like he's done a deal, a sort of backroom deal about helping with Ukraine and, not being bellicose around Syria and the Kurdish border, in exchange for being allowed to basically, he's jailed his main political rival.
Yes, yeah.
So, that situation is not heading in a particularly good direction because he's taking advantage of the fact that he knows we need him right now. Same as Israel has been doing for, many, many years. They are our only ally in the area. They are our only source of intelligence in the area, and they take advantage of it. And all the people saying, you should be 20 times stronger in your condemnation of Israel, they just don't understand the geopolitics of it.
Quiet, riot. Take me out to the ball game. What are you doing? Did you know DirecTV has the most MLB games? So, you're singing? Yeah, they put your favorite teams front and center right when you turn it on. Buy me some cold cuts and flapjacks. Those aren't even the words. I'm allergic to peanuts.
Stream DirecTV, home of the most MLB games. Visit DirecTV.com. Claim based on total games offered on national and regional sports networks. RSNs available with choice package or higher. Availability of RSNs varies by zip code and package.
Quiet, riot. Well, Alex, I'm very glad you mentioned Turkey because it was also mentioned by the German ambassador to the UK, Miguel Berger, this week, in relation to UK access to this EU defence fund in the wider context of the UK-EU reset. And basically, he has advocated for Britain to join a customs arrangement with the EU. So he was talking at a British Chamber of Commerce conference, and he referenced Turkey's long-standing customs union arrangement with the EU as a potential model for the UK. He said, when we have the review next year, we can obviously look into possibilities about where we can cut red tape, and then highlighted Turkey's 20-year customs arrangement with the EU and implied a similar arrangement should be feasible for the UK. Now, obviously, this is one of Starmer's red lines on the EU. We are not rejoining the customs union, the single market, and there will be no return to freedom of movement. So at this stage, do you think the German ambassador's intervention on this was helpful or not?
I don't think it's particularly unhelpful. Again, it's this strange dance, right? Anything that gives Starmer a chance to repeat his wretched red lines is a good thing for Labour politically, even if behind the scenes they're working on exactly this kind of arrangement, just calling it Bob instead of a customs union. So in many, many ways...
Border operating, but what could it be other be?
Business operating border.
Yeah, business operating border. Bob, yes. We're joining Bob, not the customs union. Love it.
So you heard it here first. So listen, you need push to give pushback. And Labour love giving this pushback. It makes them look good to the right sort of constituencies, while actually in practice, they are, pushing ahead with quite significant moves, like the defense thing they're talking about. It's going to be like a massive backdoor into some sort of single market custom unions arrangement. So,
Yep.
I
think if we can
give the Express something to put on its front page.
Won't someone think of the Express
live. I'm feeling generous today. The sun is shining. My app.
Your crow is crowing on the roof.
Yeah, my app is informing me that a Venezuelan lyrebird just landed on my roof, even though it's an actual crow. So I'm going to be generous.
I agree. I think if we can, look, customs union or whatever, but if we could be in the single market for defence, so, defence firms having that tariff-free, frictionless access to the single market and their people being able to cross the borders in order to do their job and supply Ukraine with what we need, then that would be such an incredible step forward. It may be wishful thinking, but come on.
Yeah, how difficult will it be to claim that communications software is defense related? How difficult will it be to claim that tires or, parts for vehicles are defense related? It really isn't difficult. So
I agree. And services that support all of those things. Okay, finally in this section then, I just wanted to ask you about, perhaps a lesser figure in all of this, President of the United States. Alex, I distinctly remember Trump said if he won a second term, he'd resolve the conflict in Ukraine in 24 hours. Alex, Donald Trump was inaugurated for his second term on the 20th of January 2025 at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. How many hours have elapsed since then?
I know you well. You've calculated this, haven't you?
Well, at the time of recording this show, I can tell you, Alex, he has been in office for exactly 1,457 hours and 57 minutes. So I think it's pretty safe to say the KPI dashboard is flashing red on that one.
It's interesting because you could also say that he's on his plan to end the war in Ukraine. He's at the moment on minus 1,420 odd hours.
Yep.
Which is a terrific score. He's smashing it. He's under that target comfortably. In other news, America is basically sliding into full-time junta now. So we'll do a special episode very, very soon and discuss it in full with one of our regular Americans. But it's bad. It's bad over there.
I've decided that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, headed by Kelly Loeffler, is a terrific person, will handle all of the student loan portfolio. We have a portfolio that's very large, lots of loans, tens of thousands of loans, pretty complicated deal. And that's coming out of the Department of Education immediately, and it's going to be headed up by Kelly Loeffler at SBA, and they're all set for it. They're waiting for it. It'll be serviced much better than it has in the past. It's been a mess. And also, Bobby Kennedy, the Health and Human Services, will be handling special needs and all of the nutrition programs and everything else. Rather complex, but that's going to be headed by and handled by Health and Human Services. So I think that'll work out very well, those two.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
In Harrogate this weekend, the Lib Dems have been gathering for their spring conference, discussing all their usual internal party reports and constitutional amendments, as well as debates on AI usage, protecting LGBTQ plus rights, and the UK's response to Donald Trump and what our response should be. There is very little in the detail of the policy motions that I personally can find to disagree with, and it all feels much more left liberal and progressive than in many recent years. Alex, I had a look through that agenda, and there are no fewer than 19 references to strengthening ties with Europe in the agenda alone. Do you think there is any chance the Lib Dems can be to Labour what for so long UKIP were to the Tories on the issue of Europe, but in the other and much better direction?
The issue for me is this, that there is and has been for a long, long time, and this is part of their strategy, and I respect and appreciate why it happens, but it's a cheeky thing to do. So there has been for a very, very long time a complete dissociation between national policy and local policy. Like, you know, the Lib Dems wanting to win a particular council election or, a parliamentary by-election will say whatever in that constituency, especially when it comes to planning issues and stuff like that, even if it is in complete discord with the party's national policy. And I think as the Lib Dems grow in numbers, and if they are hoping to continue to grow in numbers, rather than keep doing basically a Kennedy or a Clegg, do you know what I mean? Having this big spurt of growth and then losing loads of it the next election. Having another spurt of growth and losing loads of it the next election.
I just would like to point out that Kennedy did not lose.
No, I know, but someone else
His always went up and then...
But the point is someone else lost for him.
Yeah. And that would have been Nick Clegg, but okay.
No, but the point is, I'm talking about the party.
I know.
So they have to sort this out, I think. The second thing that gives me pause for thought, and this is not to throw shade on them, right? I like their program. I like their agenda. I find all of you liberals a little bit weird in general because, you don't like the state doing things. And
that's not true.
Well, yeah,
that's not true. Sorry, I do have to. What I think I liked about this agenda was that it felt like social liberalism. And go and look on Wikipedia if you want to understand more about social liberalism. It's effectively left-leaning.
I think
liberalism.
You've sent me to that before, and I have read it.
Yeah. And there was very little, if any, of that under the Clegg years, and even after that for a few years, because the impact of having been in coalition with the Conservatives really had dragged the party to the right, and a lot of the left-leaning liberals like me had left the party, so there just sort of wasn't as much of that internal pressure as there certainly was under Paddy and Charles Kennedy. And this agenda feels like there is a lot more of that thinking being injected back into the party. And libertarianism, of course, is very, very small state, and social liberalism that really is the founding ethos of the predecessor Liberal Party as well as the Liberal Democrats. And actually go and look at the preamble, listeners, of the 1970s Liberal Party constitution. It was so ahead of its time.
Oh, really? Don't do that, listeners. You've got better things to do.
No, you don't. I will leave a link in the show notes to it. It is genuinely brilliant. And it talks about green issues in a way that was way ahead of its time. A fundamental part of that has been about the muscularness of a welfare state. And I'm going to be really interested to see how Lib Dem MPs vote on any part of Liz Kendall's green paper that eventually makes it to the House.
Yeah, look, it's interesting that you choose that, because I think there is a distinct difference between things that act as a safety net and things that act as an intervention. The safety net is there if you need it. No one is going to make you take benefits. And so I think that's a slightly distinct issue. There is a philosophical difference there. I see the state as a benevolent parent. I see the state as paternalistic. You don't. That's fine. I mean, I'm not.
No,
I'm
just
just
an enabler.
I'm just saying that my instinct always is for the state to step in and say, "Don't touch that hob." That's fine. It's it's just a teeny philosophical difference. So I started by saying I didn't want to, diss their program. I think it's a really good program. I do question, and I know that Ed Davey is popular and liked, but I also don't know that he's seen as a dynamic leader. And I think there is stuff in that agenda, which I had a quick shufti at, that would require quite a dynamic leader.
Like Layla Moran.
Yeah. There are things there that need pushing through. There are things there that need convincing people who are not close to you at this point. And I just don't get those vibes from Davey. I may be wrong. I may be misjudging
him. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. No, I don't think you're wrong at all.
But he seems to me a lovely guy that has a lot of very good leadership qualities. For instance, in the way he connects with the public, in the way I think he staff manages the party. I think, I don't know when was the last time. I know there was a little bit of business around various leadership elections. They're always fractious periods. But since he's been leader, I can't remember loads of sort of Lib Dem contacts sending me DMs going, God, he's such a dick. Do you know what I mean? He seems...
Yeah, no. He's more of an avuncular figure than a hate figure at the moment.
He seems to be a good CEO of the organization that is the Lib Dem party, if that makes sense. But I don't know that he's got that kind of...
radical streak to push the agenda in a more progressive direction. I think you're probably right there. And I hope that our Lib Dem listeners who were at the conference enjoyed themselves, and we'll be looking to see whether those policy motions got through and if they were amended. And I'm sure we're going to have an actual Liberal Democrat politician on very soon to tell us about the future of the party and how they intend to play things over the course of the next 4 years.
Quiet riot. And without my dear and my dears, let's draw Sunday School to a close. Listeners, thank you ever so much for tuning in. Make sure you've headed over to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod if you're in a position to help keep this show on the road. And if you're not, make sure to share your favorite episode with a friend and make sure to give us a rating and a review. Because let me tell you, listeners, someone left a review on Podyssey the day before the first episode was out. That was a 1-star review and said, when is the first episode out? And someone left a review on Quiet Riot, which you may not have seen, Naomi, that dropped as a whole 0.1 of the rating. The review read, Naomi, it's not Z. There's a perfectly good word for the last letter of the alphabet. It's Z. 1 star. So what I'm trying to say is that...
How did I do that?
What I'm trying to say is that these people leave reviews. So you need to as well, because otherwise we're left to contend with these loons.
We'll be back next week with a full show, getting into the detail of the spring statement with friend of the show, the economist Vicky Price. And we may even drop a bonus episode too, because I think producer Kenny has been busy on a special episode.
And a very exciting special it is. But for now, keep calm, keep sane, and keep on writing quietly.
Safe in the knowledge that we love you lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet, Ryan.